Christine from the Council for Learning Outside the Classroom, and we're here today with Dominique Bouchard from English Heritage, who's going to be sharing their learning from when they reopened, how they developed their program, and then how they reopened their site at the end of the last lockdown. So we know through all our masterclasses that providers have been exploring how they can support schools in different ways. So you're developing their online offer to planning for future visits and how they engage with schools. So what we want to do is share those learnings and help you develop what you do, and for schools to reassure you that providers out there really do putting everything in place to make sure that when you're able to do face-to-face visits again, everything is being done as safely as possible. And so here we're kind of a reassurance, but also a learning process as well. During the session when Dominique is talking, please can you pop questions into chat. If you move your cursor, you'll find the chat function. It can just be a bit difficult keeping track of people. So we'll let Dominique go through her presentation. If you have anything you want to ask while she's talking, just pop it into chat, and then we'll go through that at the end. And then also she'll be available to take questions live at the end as well. We are recording the session. I hope you don't mind, but that's so members of CLOTC can watch it who haven't been able to make it today. We're able to catch up later. But without further ado, thank you again, Dominique, for taking part in the session today, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I think everybody's muted, so I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. Oops. So thank you all for coming today. I'm really looking forward to sharing kind of our experience with you. And I've been asked to talk about how English Heritage has been supporting schools and learners through, through the current pandemic and crisis. And I thought really the first thing I wanted to talk about was we're very much about supporting teachers, and that was a primary sort of concern for us as we went, and we structured our thinking around our support for for COVID and for learning under COVID under three key strands for education, but all of these are embedded within the broader context for English Heritage, and that was really. And those three key strands for education really boiled down to three key, I don't want to say exactly audiences because they're all intermingled and interlinked in a lot of ways, but it was how we structured our thinking about this to kind of address the problem that we were trying to solve. So my slides don't want to move. There we go. So delving more into this idea of audiences, our organization is structured around the idea of visitor first. So we try to begin all of our plans, whether that's an interpretation scheme or a commercial element, restructure, doing up our LUs to our schools program by thinking about stepping into the shoes of the people that we're trying to serve. And so with our digital plans for learning, which are obviously a really important part of what we were doing, we wanted to create and recurate the resources for different groups that we thought would be reaching out for them. And these were the sorts of groups that, that we were really mindful of in terms of who was going to be looking for this material and what were their concerns and priorities going to be. So, so in terms of, for everybody, we turned our attention to our online platform. Our main platform is our website, and we worked to improve the user journey and to develop our online learning resource offering. And the user journey was really important because I think before the pandemic, we hadn't really focused that much attention, and we hadn't really been thinking about, what is when somebody's looking for something and they come to our website, how can we make this as logical and as straightforward as possible for them to find the material that they're looking for. And whereas previously we're really focusing on a very, I guess, conventional relationship between teacher, pupil, and school, that relationship really got disrupted by the pandemic. So it made us think much more about those groups and their requirements and the requirements of the people who'd be supporting them as well. So we kind of reassessed the teaching resources area of our website, which is the lander page that you can see here. And we overhauled the layout to make it a lot more user-friendly and comprehensive. So what you see on this slide is our teacher, this is multiple sort of screen grabs from sections of the web, but you can see we've got our teachers kits up here, which are comprehensive resources. We've got, we wanted to, and we curated this to showcase and pull out particular content that would have really engaging activities that could be done at home or in the classroom, because you had this much more blended learning experience. And we built this new resources library so that everything we have is on one page and is browsable by theme, by key stage, and by region. Because early on in the lockdown, some of our free to enter sites were still open, and so we wanted to people to be able to visit, to sort of take advantage of their local sites. But we also felt like actually this was an approach that we wanted to take that potentially would last. So once sort of schools are sort of up and running in terms of their school visit program, we wanted to make it really easy for teachers to say, okay, I want to visit a site, and be able to look and find something that's near them. But previously this kind of organization here, where you can browse by theme, key stage, or region, wasn't available on our website, and we just really felt like it was really important. We also created new sections specifically for the GCSE, because we felt like those students were people were really needed as much support as they could in the given what was going on. So we know teachers are under pressure at the best of times. So we wanted to make our resources easy to find for them, and also for them to be able to sort of access those resources directly from the web. So here, you can see, let's say somebody's interested in prehistory, all of these resources are right here. It's really easy to see immediately when you get to this website what content there is, and be able to identify the materials that would work, that you want to use. And again, this is all of our resources are all curriculum linked. They're all really developed and rigorously managed and overseen by qualified teachers. And so, but we also knew that there were a lot of parents who were trying to do this for the first time and having a really difficult time with it. I have friends who who sort of did math at home by printing out like outlines of numbers and had their 13 and 14-year-olds color them in, because they just got to kind of the end of their tether with supporting homework. And so we just wanted to make things as easy as possible. And thinking about home learning and parents and guardians being in the position, many of them for the first time, that they were going to have to lead this process, we created a new page or area of our learning section as well, which was about supporting teaching history at home, and had really specific guidance for history and broken down by time period, again, so that it could be really simple. So somebody's got so a child has a program on prehistory, or has to do something on the Normans, it'd be really straightforward for a parent to find some resources that they could use kind of out of the box, turnkey resources that were going to be able to make it easy. So, these are, if you delve into the sort of the teaching area, you can see there's all of this really rich content with expert advice from our historians and curators, cross-curricular learning links, because homeschool isn't like you have English class and then you have history class. Lots of these things are all being done together. We've got suggested activities, and getting to grips with the period. We were aware that while teachers are familiar with this material, parents really many of them haven't studied it since they were themselves the age of their children. And so they needed to be able to feel confident enough really quickly to be able to support their children in their learning journey. So all of these things are, there are activities and videos and loads of content that we wanted to make it, again, as straightforward as possible for parents and guardians who were supporting home learning, but again, really great for teachers as well, so that they could assign resources from our website directly. We also know how important that anniversaries are, and we wanted to create a really special resource to help teachers and families link into national celebrations. And just because there was a lockdown, it doesn't mean that some of these important key dates were being forgotten. Kind of the monotony of being locked at home all the time means that actually anything that we can do to punctuate that that kind of extended period, we really wanted to. And we know that, you know, schools find and historical anniversaries and significant moments in the country's history is really important teaching elements. And so we thought we'd produce an enrichment, you know, a series of enrichment resources to go along with that. So in May and June, we delivered a 10-day learning activity. I guess I wouldn't call it a festival, but a program that pupils could do whilst following along with events to mark the 70th anniversary of Operation Dynamo, which was the Dunkirk evacuation and a pivotal operation in the Second World War. So we took a cross-curricular approach with this and developed code-breaking tasks, a descriptive sensory exercise, a translation activity, a design and build challenge. All of these things were things that, you know, anybody can do at home without any specialist materials at all. The design and build activity required really, you know, paper, that sort of thing. And also the opportunity to be creative and to use their imagination and produce artwork. And you know, so the artistic challenge was to create a newspaper front page activity, and there was a chance to write a military report using actual progress reports, you know, filed during the operation. So again, it's always about bringing that rich historical content in and making sure that the learning is as rich and as sort of content rich as possible, so that even though the circumstances in which you know, pupils will be covering this material isn't ideal, you know, we make it as straightforward as we can. So our online resources have also been added to by adding in more thematic pages, like a step-by-step guide to celebrating solstice at Stonehenge, which is over here, with learning ideas and activities and supporting video content and useful reading. I mean, you know, the downside of all of this materials are really interesting, and I've played with many of them myself. I believe in road testing. But, you know, at the end of the day, the pandemic has really adversely affected young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who don't have regular internet access and don't have enough equipment at home to have 2 or 3, you know, themselves and a sibling or 2 siblings all using the internet and using devices at the same time. So there's a real limitation here. And however great our work is in this area, we always need to be mindful that by focusing, that digital is great, but there's a huge access barrier that it creates, which, you know, isn't there necessarily in schools and in classrooms. And from a sort of an equity perspective, there's a lot of work if digital and online learning is going to be with us for some time, that, you know, we all need to think about how to overcome this. Anyway, so just going back into this, you know, the summer solstice is really important, and something that got a lot of media attention. And we also had a sort of the chance to watch the live stream of the sunrise at Stonehenge on the morning of the solstice. And so all of these materials were there for people to engage with. We also developed a Black Lives in Britain page, which launched ahead of Black History Month in October. And that page highlights the experiences of Black individuals linked with English heritage sites. And like all of our content, it's always being updated and expanded as we find out more and we develop more resources to support teachers and learners to explore these stories. And you can see there's loads of different elements of content here. The Sarah Forbes Bonetta, Queen Victoria's goddaughter, is from the 19th century. The Prisoners of War at Portchester Castle is a fascinating story from the 18th century, and the Napoleonic Wars, again, another area that has real, that teachers have been wanting to pull into their teaching, and we need to be able to provide resources to make that as easy as possible. So one of our other projects, which we managed to kickstart and and do during this period is something called curators collections. So this was developed in partnership with the collections curators at English Heritage, and it's a chance for us really to showcase objects in the collection and how these objects on our sites can be used as primary source material, and also to showcase the curator's role in sort of documentation and the stewarding of the collection. So we think that it's really important for young people, for pupils to get a sense of heritage careers, of what careers are out there and what opportunities there may be. And of course, visiting a heritage site is a great way to see a lot of this stuff in action. But you know, even when a school visits a site, they're not going to necessarily see the sort of thing that you see in these images, or be able to connect with these objects in that way. And I think being able to use a digital platform in the way that we have means that, you know, we've been able to create a lot of rich primary source material, which is a term we like to use in the heritage and museum sector. Collection is driven. So the idea is that our collections drive the material that we produce, drive the content that we communicate about. And so for us, it's about identifying the way in which our collection can serve the national curriculum. And we do that through the curators' collections. We do that through the Black Lives in Britain. We do that through the thematic pages, and definitely through anniversary work like Operation Dynamo. Does that make sense to everybody? So just going back to the curators' collections. So far we've got a range of these curators' collections for a very diverse range of sites. So Hadrian's Wall is one of them. We've got Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, Pevensey Castle, Battle Abbey, and Kenwood. And you'll see there's, you know, some of the objects that you see here are from different sites across, or different collections from different sites across the organization. Ooh. So, you know, I think just going back to the Stonehenge page, because that falls under something that we're calling thematic pages. And I just want to touch on that very briefly. So the new pages that are dedicated to solstice at Stonehenge, I think really exemplify what we've tried to do in terms of bringing our content together in a way that would be comprehensive, but also comprehensible to non-experts like parents. You know, and they fit into a more sort of thematic page structure that includes elements like the step-by-step guide to celebrating the solstice at Stonehenge with, again, cross-curricular activities, further learning ideas, further reading and everything. So we want to be creating sort of things for people to hook their work onto, but then have rich content of a variety of approaches and forms, so that we're trying to cover learning styles, we're trying to cover teaching styles, we're trying to cover and make things, again, as easy and as accessible as possible. You know, suitable for teachers, but will also work for families. That's the ethos that we tried to bring around to this. And you know, it's all about, and it has all been about, accessibility. You know, making opportunities for the pupils who would normally be coming to our sites, engaging with the National Heritage Collection, engaging with the object-driven primary source approach to learning and cross-curricular activities, but trying to do that as best we can through digital means. So then we did stuff really specifically aimed at home learning, and parents and guardians who would be doing home learning as something that, you know, was really terrifying for lots of them, and also something they were trying to fit in around a full-time job, you know, caring responsibilities, other children, eating, sleeping, bathing. You know, I'm always impressed by people who manage to sort of have, you know, keep their household together while having children under the age of, I'd say 15, but some people put that a little bit younger than me. So in terms of supporting home learning, you know, we knew that not all the schools were going to be able to implement a distance learning model very quickly, or even at all. And so we were aware that families were having to do and lead a lot of home learning. And whether that was supporting school assignments or work or trying to provide enrichment activities due to, I guess, widespread closure of museums or the usual places that you might go for these sorts of enrichment. So they both had a kind of a curriculum-driven, I guess, requirement, but also an enrichment one. So what we did was create this, what we called a home learning hub. And we wanted to provide this support for parents and guardians who are homeschooling for the first time. And this was really very focused on that. You saw some of that before, and this is another area for that we were able to develop. So this home learning hub was really, again, to provide tips and ideas for helping parents and learners to study at home. And we also supported some other kinds of activities, and this is probably one of the most successful one that we did, which was called History at Home Live. And these were weekly live history shows that were presented by the CBBC presenter Ben Shires and featured an English heritage expert. And we filmed them across two series, the 22nd of April and the 15th of July. So, so Ben would be in his house, and one of our curators or historians would be in their house, and they'd pick a subject and they'd go through it. The program was live streamed onto YouTube and our Facebook via the English Heritage channels, and the content was selected to support the national curriculum, and the creative tasks sort of assigned at the end of each episode had really solid learning foundations. And so the learning team was involved in shaping these episodes so that not only would they be entertaining, but they delivered real learning content. The collaboration really ensured that the content that was covered in these episodes had curriculum relevance, and the creative tasks were also fun. And I think that that's really important. You know, the level of fun that's required or allowable in a classroom is different than what's required in a home environment. We tried to strike a balance and to, you know, figure out where people were. These history lessons live routinely had about more than 10,000 people streaming them live when they aired, and each video has been watched between 30,000 and 70,000 times. This is a really amazing bit of content. And I should also say that once it aired on YouTube or Facebook, we would put the link to it to the relevant part of our themed learning pages. So you didn't have to search around for videos or worksheets or another kind of resource. It was all around a particular theme and all around particular key stages. So we had really an overwhelmingly positive response to the History at Home, the History Lessons Live series. We engaged a really broad audience. There were educators and heritage professionals alongside families, and some were intergenerational groups, so that we knew that they were, sometimes grandparents would be watching this with their grandchildren, but they'd be watching obviously in different places, and then they'd be able to talk about it later. So it became a kind of an event that the family could do together, which you know, it wasn't our intention initially, but it was a really wonderful outcome to be able to do that. And of course, you know, lots of people tuned in week on week and were engaging by commenting in the sidebar, or, you know, or asking questions, which would be answered live on air, and by the presenter and the expert curator. And we reached an incredibly wide audience, including people in North America, South America, across Europe. I mean, it's really incredible. And then at the end of each episode, there was kind of a creative challenge that you could do, and people would send us photographs of what they made, whether it was a biscuit henge with bourbon creams or something less edible. And so again, as I said, once the sessions aired, we fed the videos onto our teaching resources page as additional learning resources for teachers and pupils and parents and guardians to use. So now I guess this is the real meat of it, which is the reopening to education groups. So we needed to make sure, well, how did it happen first is the first thing. So on the 18th of March, all the sites closed, and then in terms of reopening, there were really 3 phases. From the 31st of August, we had our education bookings opened again, and there were about 10,000 bookings that were taken between September and October. Some of them had to be canceled because of local lockdowns and that sort of thing, but we were able to deliver 4,000 visits on our sites, which was really, really great. It was very important, though, that we communicate and let everybody know what was happening and make sure everyone was safe. So we needed to make sure our communications with teachers was really as simple as possible. And that included setting out what to expect on a visit. And then also, the what to expect page sets out how things will be different at each site, how they can be explored differently to comply with the government guidelines and keep visitors safe. And then to help with the planning, we developed risk assessments, which you see here, for our discovery visits and free education visits as well. And then we created a general managing education visits risk assessment covering all of the other activities. And again, the what to expect FAQs are on our website, and the general, as are the general risk assessments as well. I mean, for those teachers, if you want to have a look at them, and for other organizations, you may see what we've done and think that it's good, and maybe you don't think it's good, but you may find it helpful. So in terms of our discovery visits, and these were expert-led visits. So our free education visits are self-led visits for schools. And so those tended to be, if a school arrives and the school's in a bubble, then it's a fairly straightforward thing in terms of accommodating that visit. We had the normal procedures in place in terms of limiting the numbers of people who could be on site at a time. We had there were one-way systems in place in order to support social distancing. But for the discovery visits, we adapted those to a COVID-safe delivery where it's been possible to do so. So at the moment, about half of the DVs that we offer have been converted, and the way we prioritize that was selecting the most popular discovery visits and those that already had bookings for the autumn of 2020. And we're continuing now to adapt more of them as well. And so if you are interested in booking a discovery visit, come check out our website and keep an eye on it, because we're updating it all the time to reflect the widest possible options and opportunities for schools. So when it comes to the discovery visits, we really had to approach these visits in a totally new way. They had to take place outside. They couldn't have any object handling by the pupils, and no dressing up. And those are 2 things that are really core parts of our DVs. But they also needed to retain their educational value and maintain their interactivity and their fun. I mean, those are really important for us in terms of these DVs. So we came up with socially distanced alternatives and retaining the use of objects by facilitators, who now use more sensory description to engage the pupils with the objects that they're involving. We also focused on continuing to provide opportunities for discovery and role play within discovery visits, taking socially distanced and again, the movement of other visitors around the site into consideration. And we took advantage of the fact that schools were in bubbles, and so that meant the pupils could, within reason, interact with each other. And so there's a lot more of that role play that's become part of our work now as well. But each site presented a unique circumstance and a unique situation. And so, so there was really, everything was bespoke. And so there wasn't sort of a one size fits all approach that, would have been possible. So we were reopened, as I mentioned, to education visits in September for the new academic year. We got about 4,000 education visitors across our sites between September and October for both the free education visits and the discovery visits. And the feedback has been really brilliant. We've received, this teacher who had visited Conisbrough Castle, talked about the way in which they felt safe. And again, our priority, I guess more than anything else, was to make sure that that everybody felt safe. Because if that's always got to be, especially in the current situation, the most important criteria. In some instances, our sort of adaptations proved really popular and successful, and they made an improvement to sort of the usual experience for both the visiting groups and the facilitators. For example, this conquest tour, and the conquest tour entails discovery visit at Battle Abbey, where pupils sort of replay the Battle of Hastings themselves. Nobody dies on the battlefield. And so now taking students onto the battlefield to reenact the battles is now going to be part of what we do, because it's been so enjoyable and successful. Some new developments. And so while, while we've sort of dedicated energy and time to making the sites as safe and easy to visit as possible for education groups, we're also looking at opportunities to engage with the groups. So for example, a digital version of Osborne's popular Waiting on Hand and Foot discovery visit has been developed to very positive reviews during the piloting that took place at the end of 2020. And this opens up the site in a totally new way to schools, future-proofing the engagement at Osborne during a time when it's really still uncertain when residential visits will start up again on the Isle of Wight. And so we're hoping to use our learning from this development to inform other sessions at other sites. So it's been a really exciting period of experimentation. And because we haven't been as restricted in our thinking as maybe there were conventions that we always adhered to before, it meant that we were a little more imaginative, trying to figure out how do we keep people safe. But if that's the main criteria and the curriculum is the other criteria, then actually you've got quite a bit of freedom. And I think that the team found it really creative. I'm just going to say something about local history, because local history is a really important part of curriculum, especially for Key Stage 2 and 3, and is something that teachers are looking at, I think, even more so at the moment, because of not being comfortable traveling or not being able to travel distances to get to sites. So to support a kind of a much more local approach to this, we're working with our historians and education officers that have a regional remit to develop some local learning pages that are going to launch soon. So this isn't live yet. This is sort of a preview of something that's coming. And they're going to offer a guide about how our sites, in a really broad way, because we have 420 sites, so we can't create 420 different resources, but there are going to be some similarities that we can take advantage of. And so the idea is, how do we do that so that sites all around the country can be used to support local history study at Key Stage 2 and 3, and providing information about the history of the area, suggested reading activities, again, and further cross-curricular learning ideas. So I'm almost done. So thank you for bearing with me. So during the last lockdown, one of the things that we trialed were sort of informal Q&A video conferencing sessions for school groups. And the work was really made possible by really the real legwork of the regional officer team, who really wanted to make sure that students had as much of an ability to connect in a really personal way with our sites as possible. And they've had overwhelmingly positive feedback. And this sort of kind of proving, although I guess we didn't really doubt it, but it does prove that there's an appetite for virtual sessions based on our sites and their stories. And so we're exploring how we might be able to support this once sites open up again. And of course, you'll see from the quote on the right, that for some schools, in one part of the country, it opens up a potential for a visit to a site that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to visit. And I think that's really important. So reopening again. So we're kind of reopening to education visitors again, as we did following the previous lockdown, and providing, what to expect from teachers, the risk assessments, all of that stuff. And we're continuing to explore the opportunities for online engagement with the education groups. And again, continuing to do everything. We're very much want to make sure that we're following the guidance from DCMS. And so, we're expecting to hear from what the advice is on the 12th of April. A lot of this material, a lot of these activities we've done, making assumptions. We do have teachers that we talk to, but we can't talk to everybody all the time. And, teachers have had a lot of stuff on lately. So we're doing a survey at the moment about our school trips and teaching resources. And so if you take down the little, this little, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this little over here, this little website, you'll get a survey and you'll be entered into a prize draw, and you get, hopefully you'll win the prize. But we'll also hopefully get lots of information about what we could be doing better and what we've got right. So thank you. That's it. If you'd like, again, take note of the website for the survey, get in touch with us. You can, our education Twitter handle over here is really active. Feel free to tweet us, give us a follow. And thank you for listening to me.
Oh, thank you so much, Dominique. That was absolutely brilliant. It was great to see how an organisation had taken it, from start to finish, almost, and how you've had to adapt what you do. So yeah, really interesting, very comprehensive resources that you've got on there, and it's great to see, how you translated what you were doing in the real world to what you could do virtually. I think it was a very interesting point that you made that imagine whilst COVID has been awful and all the restrictions have been extremely limited, it has actually forced us to be quite imaginative, to look at what we do, how we do it. We can't do it the usual way, so what can we then do? So that came through very strongly. You seem to do, in terms of your kind of leadership structure, they encourage you to be imaginative and to kind of blue sky thinking about what you could possibly do.
Oh yeah, I think, Christine, if you mute yourself, because you're getting some feedback from me. I'm sort of your classic disruptive sort of presence in the organization. So I think I've really, I think we really, it was all motivated by our desire to serve pupils. Education has been, the pupils' education has been, aside from the loss of life, one of the most devastating parts of this pandemic. And there is a whole, millions of children who have lost out on the important and fantastic and outstanding work that teachers do. And there's nothing that we're going to be able to do as an organization to bridge that gap, because it's a vast chasm. But thinking about how we can serve pupils as best we possibly can was, it was what was required, but it was also a sense of what our purpose was. One of our missions at English Heritage is education, and we take it really seriously. And we felt that, this is an audience that we want to be serving, and we felt that this was an opportunity for us to kind of step up and, roll up our sleeves and do what we could. And I think that there's always more that you can do. There's always, you'd always do things differently in future, but, we had an obligation, and I feel like one of the pleasures of the job over the last 12 months has been to try to serve people who need it. But again, we're acutely aware that digital, provides a lot of opportunities for people who are in a position to take up those, to take advantage of those opportunities. And for the people who can't, it just compounds the, the marginalization and the challenges they experience.
That's a really good point. But hopefully now with more children being back at school, the fact that you still have your digital resources available, that point which you made about the school in Cornwall, while we never want digital or virtual to replace the real world, and the interaction you get there is on another level. The fact that there are now more opportunities for schools and to engage with facilities, providers, venues that they previously wouldn't have been able to due to geography or financial limitations. So, getting a group of children on a bus and traveling, 30 miles or what have you, everything has cost associated with it.
Yeah.
Do you see a balance between the two?
I think, 15 years ago, people in the museum sector used to get really we used to get our knickers in a twist a little bit, because the whole idea of collections online meant that people, every conference you went to, somebody asked the question, what if we put our collections online? Nobody's going to visit the museum. And it's the stupidest question you could possibly ask, because watching people do things on TV doesn't mean that you don't feel hungry or you don't want to go for a walk. We watch things and we do things, and we use media and digital media as a way to inspire ourselves and to entertain ourselves, but it's not a replacement for real world activity. And in fact, it was completely obvious, as many people predicted, that by putting your collection online, more people visited your museum, because the barrier to entry, that barrier to sort of get over that first hump was much lower, because visiting a website doesn't require as much effort as walking into a museum. And going to a website isn't necessarily as scary as going into a museum, because if you go to a website and you don't like it, you can leave. You go to a museum and you feel intimidated, then that's a terrible experience, and that's going to stay with you. So in the same way that these sorts of digital programs, I hope, will lower the barrier, or whether that's a conceptual barrier, whether it's a barrier that teachers trying to convince someone in the administration that this is a good idea and this is a valuable experience. Having a taste of something never means that your appetite is fully sated. And I think that's these digital interventions, the live ones, they take a lot of time. And so if we're doing that, it means somebody isn't delivering a session on site. So we really need to think very carefully about how our resource works. But we're trying to be creative with it. We're trying to make sure that, we do the best that we can for as many people as we can.
That is a really good point. We do have a couple of questions. So Wendy has asked, have you thought of any summer school activities? Do you think, is that something you'd be looking to get involved with?
I mean, it sounds really, what I don't know is, do you mean the pupils will be in summer schools and supporting summer school visits to our sites, or do you mean us running a summer school?
Wendy, do you want to jump in?
I was actually wondering about you running them on site, so that maybe I'm not sure how it's going to pan out in schools itself, but maybe there would be an option for parents as well to appreciate being able to enroll kids in a summer school.
I mean, it's an incredible idea. We don't have believe it or not, we don't really have the staff or the kind of human resource capacity to run something like that. The National Learning Team at English Heritage is actually 4 people. And most of the work that you saw of those digital resources was really just fewer people than that, because we as an organization, we took advantage of the furlough, because our main source of income as an independent charity are ticket sales. So I think that's an amazing idea, and I'd be interested in exploring what it would take for us to be able to do something like that, because I'm sure there are some sites that would be amazing venues for summer schools. I mean, our school visit program potentially is available all year. Schools tend to book our discovery visits during school term, but there isn't a reason why they couldn't be booked out of school term as well. So if there are summer schools that want to come to our sites and take advantage of these workshops and resources, that they're there for everyone.
I was sort of wondering, in a way, whether there's a sort of strategy that says that schools who've got some catch-up funding during the summer could apply and buy programs for you that would fund some extra staff resource or something.
It's a very, very interesting discussion that I would very much like to continue.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's making it up a little bit as we go at the moment, and that means, I mean, I think that's great, because as long as the purpose is to deliver great education to children, especially those children who've missed out, then everybody seems to be open. So that seems like it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it?
Maybe one possibility would be to think of, I don't know, some hubs, of your properties around the country that would be starters, and then contact some schools? I don't know.
I think that's a really, really interesting. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Really great idea.
Maybe just flagging up to people that those school visits are available any time of year, so that schools, it kind of puts the onus on them to think, oh great, that's a great idea, we can still do trips or whatever, whatever they're planning.
Well, that's a great point. And actually something else that I don't think I was very clear about at all in my talk is that our free education visits are actually free. So for school groups to come to our sites and do the free education visit, actually it's school groups, scout groups can do them, Girl Guides, any kind of education group can do a free education visit to our site, and it is free. Our expert-led discovery visits do have fees associated with them to help cover the cost of the experts who help us with them, and they do provide us with a little income. But the FEVs, admission to our sites are free for education groups. That is it's not something that I think is as well known as it could be, and I think that's really important. So especially when we're talking about that local learning at Key Stage 2 and 3, if a teacher wants to do a local history unit, they're near an English heritage site, and I mean many of those sites are free to enter anyway. But it means that we just try to just take that barrier right down. And I think a lot of schools and teachers will be interested in doing things within walking distance, and we want to be facilitating as much as possible, all of that activity.
I'm just thinking, because if people don't mind, just for 2 minutes, I'm representing something that I kind of started called My Primary Schools at the Museum. I'm an architect, I'm not a teacher, but I've been developing this program over a few years now, and we've got a new hub attached to Oxford Brookes to develop it and do the research. But we did the longest pilot I've run was an 11-week project at Arbeia, which is an archaeological, the fort up in Tyne and Wear at the end of the wall there. And we had 9 and 10-year-olds in there for 11 weeks, a whole term, doing full cross-curricular stuff, but on an archaeological site. So to begin with, the teachers were really confused about using that site for every subject, but it worked spectacularly. And then those kids became expert guides for the rest of their school, and so on and so forth. So I'm just thinking that, I'm sure you've got incredible sites that could do exactly that.
That's a really interesting idea.
It's my kind of, that's my stick anyway.
Thank you.
It was very successful, I need to say.
That sounds fascinating. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, I think Wendy, we might have to have you on to talk about that, because that's really interesting to how a school used one area for a whole term for their whole delivery, activity delivery. I mean, with anything, although while English Heritage focuses on history, obviously it fulfills many areas of the curriculum. It cuts across so many. I think helping teachers or supporting teachers to understand, whilst you may go to a venue or use the resources to support one particular angle, the benefits are much more wide-ranging than that, don't you think, Dominique?
I do, and I think there's a few things there. One is that if we can offer any venue, any sort of provider that can offer cross-curricular learning as part of its activity, is going to make it easier for the teachers to justify the visit. Because rather than going and I say I'm going to do this and it's going to deal with history, Key Stage 2 history, whatever, this particular area, but if it does history and geography and English, then actually that's a lot more value for money from the school and for the resources for the school. The other part of that, though, in saying support it, you want to support all cross-curricular learning, is that I think sometimes we put a little bit too much responsibility on teachers for knowing how to do that. It's going to a museum, going to an art museum and looking at art. It's kind of a linear thing. It makes sense. But understanding how to draw out STEM, how to draw out all of these different areas from a particular heritage site, we need to provide training. Teachers need to have training for that sort of thing. They need to have support and assistance. Otherwise, I think it can feel really opaque. When I worked in Ireland, I set up a partnership between my museum and the Teacher Training Institute, and part of their coursework was coming to the museum to understand how you learn to deploy museum learning in your classroom. And that's great, because otherwise you might as well give somebody, a Portuguese dictionary and tell them to come back in 3 weeks and speak and have a conversation in Portuguese. It's just not going to happen. I mean, sometimes it will, but very occasionally, and you can't bet on it. So I feel like what we really need to be doing is supporting teachers at source with understanding and giving them the confidence to really take advantage of all the resources out there. Because if it requires a steep learning curve from them, then frankly, we're not meeting them where we should be.
What we actually did was get the museum learning officers to directly to teach with the teachers and the teaching assistants, and we were terribly cruel, because to begin with, because at the time the initial work was done with King's College London, and then they were able to fund the initial pilots, and we actually we did this fully curricular in art museums and actually at Botanic Gardens as well. So in an art museum we were still doing maths at Tate Liverpool and in the Fitzwilliam with little ones. So, but at the end of the day, you're completely right, Dominique, that what it proved was that the teachers and the museum learning officers weren't as on the same page as I just assumed they would be. And they weren't, but they came together. And since then, those music, anyway, I can put my email in the chat, and if anybody's interested, I'll tell you.
Please do. Thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you there, Dominique. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Please do either raise your hand or put your screen on and raise your hand so we can see you, or you can pop it into the chat function. Just like to say we've had some really lovely comments, Dominique.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for I'm looking at the comments now. It's really, really kind of everyone to say thank you very much. And yeah, I mean, please, please get in touch. The learning team is brilliant. Our senior learning manager is a woman called Kate Armstrong, and she's just fabulous. And I've taken a lot of credit for her work here, and so all of these wonderful comments really belong to her, I think, and her team, and our fabulous education visits officers. So it's a very small but mighty group at English Heritage. There are 7 education visits officers, and the national learning team is 4 people. So this is a mammoth effort by a very small number of people who do really, I feel very inspired by their work. So I'll take all of your very kind comments back to them.
That's very, very generous of you. I do have to say your presentation was excellent. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to us. And as there don't seem to be any further questions, thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you found it as inspiring and enriching as I did. It really was very, very good and very comprehensive. Do join us. Do have a look at our website, Council for Learning Outside the Classroom, lotc.org.uk. We have a series of webinars coming up and masterclasses. So it's always great to see you there. We love to share good practice. So if you have any ideas or any suggestions of what you'd like to hear or things you'd like to know about, please do get in touch. These experiences are for you. So we want to give you the skills and the knowledge that you need. So do get in touch with any suggestions. But apart from that, thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you again, Dominique.
Thank you. Bye-bye.